Hey, Mike, how you doing?
How's it going, Mr. DeLuca?
Okay. Did did we ever install the little library in D Hart Park?
No, that's happening on Friday because I think they're doing a
Yeah.
unveiling on Saturday, the 11th.
Okay.
So
So,
we're gonna put it in. We're gonna put a bag over the top of it, and then they're
okay.
gonna display it on Saturday. So
Okay.
we should be putting that in on the 11th.
Okay. Just because she sent me Jerry Harmon sent me a text asking if it's all set.
Yeah, I have the library itself sitting here in my office. We just got to build a little platform for it. So I'll send the guys to Home Depot, get a couple of 4x4s, and we'll get it put together and stained and installed on Friday.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is becoming a pretty popular meeting. Okay, it's 8 o'clock. We're going to get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Um, we have a number of items to discuss, and I know the public is here. So let me just give everybody a little background. This is the Engineering, Public Works, and Planning Committee of the Township Committee. Uh, the Township Committee has about 7 subcommittees. This is one of them. We meet monthly at 8 a.m. on the second Wednesday of the month. And our responsibility is to address issues that are related to public works, engineering, and then planning going forward on capital projects and what have you. Today, we're going to get into a few issues that have come up. The first one, I don't know if anyone is here from Garthwaite.
We are.
You are, okay, good.
We are.
You're going to be the first item on the agenda. Then we're going to go to Prospect Street. We had one item on the agenda regarding the crosswalk at the church in the Crescent, but we'll expand that to deal with. Yeah, let me just mute folks. If you could just mute yourself, that would be helpful. We're going to expand that conversation to include what I know some of you are here about, and that is just the general condition of traffic on Prospect. Then we're going to talk about Parker. There is a corridor improvement plan that includes bike lanes on Parker, and then from there we're going to go into the regular part of our agenda, which is quite long, and we usually last about 2 hours. So certainly anyone can stay for as long as you'd like, but we understand that you all have lives and you want to be here for what's important to you. So, but before I get into that, we do start with public comment. Is there anyone here who does not want to speak about either Garthwaite, Prospect, or Parker? Okay. So then let's go to Garthwaite. We did receive a delegation of residents at the last township committee meeting. They provided us with a letter. The letter was shared with members of the township committee. I've included the sort of the meat of the letter in the agenda, and basically they're looking for their street to be put on the paving list for 2025. So Diana, you're here, so I welcome you to make some comments. And anyone else from the street.
Thanks, Vic. There are a number of us on the call this morning. You know, I've raised this issue, Garthwaite Terrace and the condition of the roads, for a couple of years now. And while we all appreciate the fact that some patchwork was done, the street is in disrepair. And it's, you know, as taxpayers and residents, we feel that the street has been overlooked. We feel that it's a liability for the town. We've had injuries, we've had you know, car damage. We have no sidewalks. We have elderly, we have handicapped, we have young children that are walking to school down, riding bikes, any number of different activities. And you know, the street is desperately in need of repaving. So I don't know if there's anybody else from Garthwaite that wants to chime in, but that's really been our statement all along, and we're looking for some action by the town.
Anyone else from Garthwaite?
I'll jump in. I'm Michael Mandel, Garthwaite resident too, and I just want to echo what Diana said. I think she's nailed it, right? The street has, we've been here many years now, and the street has never seen any attention, and it's just getting worse and worse. There's large chunks of rock that are, you know, debrising the street and causing problems, big holes. So while we did get a patch, it's still nowhere near what we would call acceptable. So we really appreciate you guys taking a look at it.
Yeah, so I just want to, anyone else from the block? Okay, so I think it was last Thursday, that a couple days after the township committee meeting, I did take a walk up, a ride, and then walk the block. It is in pretty bad condition. There's also looks like there's some drainage issues. There are sub pumps that are emptying into the street. There's some water that's pooling. And I know there were complaints at the meeting about icing in the wintertime. I did see, you know, there are no sidewalks on the block. I saw people coming home from school, walking up the street, and you know, I could understand the difficulty there because there are, it's a pretty chewed up street. Paul, can you describe what is the process for determining which streets get on the list, and then you and Patrick might talk about how ultimately we decide what streets to pave based on the money that's available.
Yeah, Committeeman DeLuca, thank you. So there is a process. We look at the condition of the road. We look at factors of, how many houses are served by the road. What's the volume of traffic on the road? Are there any special conditions associated with the road? Is it a bus stop? Is it a school route? Are there factors to consider and elevate the importance of the road? We do recognize that Kendall Ave is an area in need of drainage improvements. So I don't know if the public is aware, but we did receive a grant from Mikey Sherrill's office, a federal grant for $965,000 approximately for improvements in this area, and we're working on concepts to address drainage concerns in this along Kendall. Garthwaite, we did visit the site and the road, and I agree with the residents. It's in bad shape. There's no question it needs resurfacing. We do use, by the way, a third-party software package called Violytics, and essentially it's AI mounted to our vehicles, and it takes shots of all the streets in our township. We put them on our street sweepers so that we get full coverage. And I think the program rated Garthwaite a 4 out of 5, which means it's in need of repair. There's probably 20 to 30 roads, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, that are rated a 5 out of 5, which are even worse than Garthwaite in terms of its condition. Now, we don't rely on just Violytics to make that decision. We do our own site visits, and we confirm all of this. But I agree with the comments by the
North
president.
Broad, North Broad Street, Change Chamber, New York, about the line and bus library, Newark Road, Change Chamber, New York.
I agree with the comments by the residents. It is in need of repair, and I think, it would rank fairly high in terms of our selection process. The only thing that's holding it back is the volume. It does not have the volume of, let's say, St. Lawrence and some of the other side streets. And it's not necessarily a school route, it's a dead end. So I think that's why it hasn't been paved in such a long time.
And Patrick, could you talk about the process of our capital budgeting?
Yeah, and before the capital budgeting, I think it's important to note that while Mr. Kidner had mentioned dead ends and traffic and school routes, we also do take into consideration that there's not a sidewalk on the street. So that's something where there may be an adjustment in ranking because we understand that people are walking in the roadway. As far as capital budgeting, each year Engineering Public Works submits to me and to the Township Committee a list of roads in need of repavement. They are ranked, and we have an estimate of what we expect repaving will cost based on prior year expenses, and we will budget basically as much as we can. And this year the capital budget was over $8 million, and how we bid it out is we will put in a base bid of roads we know we can pave with the money allotted, and then we will put in alternates so that when we get bids come back, if we spend as much money as we can on the roadways. And so every year we may not know every road that we're going to get to. And so that's why sometimes we say we hope to get to this road, but we won't know until we open bids. And so next year, as part of the budget process, Paul will submit his list, and we take comments from the public during that process. So that's another opportunity for the public to come out and understand where on the list Garthwaite Terrace is and how much money we have allotted to paving, and if we think we're going to get to that street. And any resident on any street can voice their support for increase in funding so that we can get to more roadways.
And Paul, at what point do you gather this information?
We submit a preliminary budget, and that's typically sometime in October this month. and it gets refined over the course of, let's say, the next 1 to 2 months, so that by the end of the year, we're honing in terms of what the roads are gonna be and what the budget might look like. And, we have our wish list. We always shoot for the stars, but I think at the end, we have to settle for the moon. So, it's a give and take, and that process occurs over a period of months.
And roughly, it's about $1 million a year we put into the road paving.
Usually about 1.2 million is what, last year was it was 1.15 million, 1.2 million.
So, so right now, the road is close to being a top priority. It does have to get weighed versus other priorities. You are gonna factor in that, there is no sidewalk.
Mhm.
Are we talking about a strict paving job, or is this gonna have any drainage included?
Well, that's something I think we have to look further into. If we're talking about, drainage itself, that obviously adds cost, that's a consideration, and certainly sidewalk. I mean, the ordinance, section 239-32 requires homeowners to maintain sidewalk, but in areas where there aren't sidewalk, that's something that we would have to see if we have budget to even consider adding.
Yeah, I'm
So,
not sure the residents are looking for sidewalks.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and is this possible to get held up because of the Kendall project?
I don't think so. I think the Kendall project is standalone. If, a side street that might get held up would be St. Lawrence, because that's directly affecting the main that feeds Kendall. But in terms of drainage, I would not expect at this time that this would hold up that project.
Okay.
Paul, can I ask a question? Have you actually been to Garthwaite Terrace?
Yes,
You have.
yes,
So you know the conditions, so you know what you're dealing with when it comes to the budgeting process.
correct.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so, the folks from, Garthwaite, so, it is on the list, at least to be considered. It isn't on the funding list yet, but that'll all be factored into between now and, actually next month or so, right, Paul?
Yeah, it's gonna get refined for sure. We have a preliminary list. I was just talking to Dave yesterday about it, after hours, and we're trying to get it refined. Because Mr. Ware's gonna be, and Mr. Kaloje, our CFO, is gonna be looking for a preliminary budget in the near future.
Okay.
So what is our next step for the Garthwaite residents? What is our next step? What should we be doing? What should we expect? What should we attend? What's your advice?
So at this point, I think we need to wait to see what the list comes up with. What engineering comes up with, what are the streets that make the list? And then there are budget hearings in January. And if it's on the list, we'll let you know, and then you can come and speak for it. If it's not on the list, we'll let you know, and you can come and ask for it to be included. I mean, we certainly heard what you're saying, and we've been out there. We're looking at the condition. We're looking at the condition of other roads, and it's really just comes down to, can we fit it into, based on the priority of all the roads we have, can we fit it in there as a priority, and do we have the funds to do it?
You know what? We really appreciate everybody looking at this. I've lived on Garthwaite Terrace for over 25 years, and in the 25 years, nothing's been done. It's a liability for the town, sadly. And if the road is not addressed in 2025, as we stated in our statement, Vic, we'd certainly appreciate the town looking at reducing our taxes.
Okay, noted.
Okay.
Okay.
Have a great day,
So-
everyone. Thank you
Yes.
for letting us attend.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we're gonna move to Prospect Street. And I know there are folks who want to talk to us about the accident. And I'm sure there is room for us to do a lot more enforcement, police enforcement, traffic enforcement. We absolutely agree. I just want to let you know that this is not the committee to talk about that. That would be public safety. We address traffic and pedestrian safety really through 3 E's: engineering, enforcement, and education. Enforcement, we deal with it with the police. Engineering, we deal with it at this committee. And in education, we hope all of us are continuing to remind our neighbors to be safe and drive slowly and respect pedestrians. And so that's also something that we're doing. But we really would ask you, if you have comments to make, to really stick to the engineering part of it, because these are not the folks, our professionals here are not the folks who deal with enforcement. That would be later on tonight at our public safety meeting. And I'm sorry to have to separate that, but that's really our scope of responsibility here, is on the engineering and the planning side. We're going to start off by talking about a very specific issue, and that's something that Mayor Adams brought up. But before we get to that, I do want to just acknowledge that we have John and Patrick from Dynamic Traffic. These are our traffic engineers. I didn't mention Paul. Paul is our township engineer. Patrick is our business administrator. Dave is the assistant township engineer. So these are the folks who do make the plans for our roads. In addition to Mayor Adams, Township Committee member Dean Daffis is on, and I'm Township Committee member Vic DeLuca. We make up the Engineering, Public Works, and Planning Committee meeting. So with all that, we're going to get to Prospect Street. Mayor, do you want to talk about the specifics on the church and Crescent?
Yeah, just real quickly, it shouldn't take long. Paul, I think I expressed my lack of support, if you will, for the bump out on the church side at Prospect Street with the raised Belgian block and kind of a little, and I know what the goal was, to shorten the crosswalk to make it safer to cross, but I suspect, given that there's a barrier in front of it now, that it's causing problems with cars going around people who are crossing, or people who are turning left onto the crescents maybe. But is that there because there's been issues? And are we looking at either flattening that out so it's a mountable bump out, or getting rid of it entirely? Because it will impact bike lanes as well.
Right, so we did receive several reports over the course of a year of certain accidents occurring. The curb itself is actually located behind the edge line, behind the travel way. So it's maybe 1 to 2 feet off of the edge line. So if cars were in the travel lanes and they weren't trying to go around cars that were making lefts, for example, onto South Crescent, then it should not be a problem. But after receiving these reports, we wanted to put a barricade there so that we can further evaluate it. One thought was to reduce the curb reveal, maintain the bump out, but taper it. So closer to the street, it might only be 1 inch in height or 1.5 inches in height. And then then it'll transition to full height, which is about 4 to 5 inches in that area. It would transition, as you get closer to the curb line, closest to the church. So that was one thought. I think Dynamic may have some opinions on that, and they may want to express that in terms of how that bump out functions and what we should do. John, Pat, do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. John McCormick here with Dynamic Traffic. I'm here with Pat Downey. Good morning, Mayor, Vic, and everyone else. So yeah, that bump out, Nancy, as you mentioned, was installed a couple years ago to enhance the pedestrian safety at that crossing. Bump outs are typical traffic calming and pedestrian safety tools that we use. We've had very good success with a lot of them. I understand this one is maybe one of the smaller ones in size, and maybe that is why it's people are trying to bypass left turning vehicles, and because of its size, people are running up the curb. But I don't know, in my field, in my take, the fact that people are hitting that curb kind of proves the point that that bump out is somewhat necessary. It's the impatience of the driver at this location that's causing that. Maybe if the bump out was a little bigger, it wouldn't get missed by a driver, especially maybe at nighttime. It might be a little difficult to see. But the curb reveal is rather important. The curb reveal is what the headlights pick up, and that's how drivers are supposed to identify that bump out. So I was a little concerned. Paul and I talked yesterday about minimizing the curb reveal, and that's kind of contrary to what my thinking is on the bump out. But I understand that there's been some concerns with more than a few people running aground on that bump out.
Yeah,
So,
John, all Villanova respect aside,
mhm.
I think we disagree fundamentally on this one. I'm not so sure that the bump out was necessary. And I think we need to look seriously at it, either being a mountable one or painted, because it's just on one side as well. So, and if we're talking bike lanes is also on Prospect, I just think the thinking there needs to be done. There is a, crossing guard there. It's only pulling the pedestrian out about 4 feet from the curb. So it's not a significant amount. It's not like the middle of the crescent where that was a long expanse and we put that resting area, if you will, in the middle. I think we just need to rethink whether there needs to be a bump out at all, and also consideration for, I don't think it's just, anxious drivers trying to get around somebody. I think it's too close to the drive lane, and it's all of a sudden there's something there where there wasn't. I think just I'd ask you to look at it again.
Yeah, I
Very good.
would concur with Nancy. First of all, I think if we're going to have to keep that Jersey barricade up there, that's ridiculous. And I understand it was put there as a stopgap measure, but to me, that's even worse than having nothing there. But I would suggest we take a look there. I think the reality is people are going to go around. They on every other block when there's a left turn, people do go around the right of the car making the left. And it is just something that sticks out there. There's no warning that it's coming. So either it has to be a very large bump out that gives you advance notice, and then we're going to end up taking parking spaces away, which we don't want to do, or we ought to just rethink it. And I'm not sure it adds all that much safety. It's really not that big, but that's for you guys to figure out and come back to us next month to give us your recommendations. On the rest of Prospect, now we had this very unfortunate and scary situation the other day when 2 young people were hit by a driver who has been cited. I'm not exactly sure if it was careless or inattentive driving, but that person did get tickets and for failure to respect people in the crosswalk. I know Paul and John and Patrick, you've come up with some designs to deal with the question on the intersections of Elmwood and Oakland. Can you show those just to show everybody off the bat what you are thinking about as the professional engineers?
Certainly. Paul, you want me to start? Pat can throw it up there.
Sure.
You're going to see a theme, right? I'm sorry, Nancy, but like these treatments, bump outs and things are kind of where we focus to.
Oh, John, don't get me wrong. I don't mind that. Don't get me wrong. I'm talking about that specific bump out.
That's fair enough. And Nancy, if you look, and I don't mean to address you, directly, but these bump outs that we've suggested, or we've thrown these together yesterday, they're a little bit more substantial. And I think they are, because the intersections are a little bit offset, I think they would have to be anyway. There's no parking in any of these in between the intersections, so it's fine to have a more substantial feature. But I think a lot of the incidents that we're seeing is because of the bypassing vehicles. So we're trying to eliminate the ability to do that. Now it's going to be frustrating, obviously, to the driver that's in a hurry on Prospect, but that is the idea, is to minimize people coming around someone that is stopped or slow, or maybe stop for turning, or maybe stop for a pedestrian. So it's if you remember a couple of years ago, we did a lot of striping to narrow the lanes. We had a big focus on pedestrian crossings. I think we added a few crossings. We did some signage, but like the next steps would be to do something physical at the corners to some degree, like you see in the red, like bump outs. An additional step at the high pedestrian crossing locations could be push button type devices that activate signs. I don't think we want to do that the entire length of Prospect. That's quite an endeavor and a lot of blinking things, but there probably are a couple of locations that would warrant a focused pedestrian safety improvement, such as bump outs and lighted push button crosswalk signs, etc.
The rapid flashing beacons, right, John?
That's right. That's right.
I think it's important with all the people on this meeting to just understand that this has been an evolution, over the past couple of years. The town had an unfortunate incident in 2015, and I think that prompted lighting improvements on Prospect Street. We've had PSE&G upgrade all the lights to LED lighting. We've had certain studies done. I believe there was a DCA pedestrian safety review that was done by NV5, and they made recommendations, and that's what prompted this whole corridor, all the striping that occurred a few years back. So we narrowed the lanes, we daylighted the intersections, we enforced Title 39 restrictions in terms of parking at T intersections. So we've even enforced parking within stop signs on the cross streets. So I think there's been a lot of improvements made to this corridor. Obviously, there's more we can do, and that's what they're proposing now. But I think it's important for the people on the call to understand that this has been an evolution over a course of years, and the township has not just sat on our laurels doing nothing. We've actually made a significant number of improvements through the years.
Thanks, Paul. Just on the Elmwood. So just to go back, we did study the possibility of doing a three-way stop there. Did we not?
We did.
We did. We did.
What was the finding?
John, Pat, you want to talk about it?
So just to kind of set the table for that, always stops are, a popular treatment that we get requests for a lot, but there's some pretty specific criteria set by the Federal Highway Administration for when you can and cannot implement an always stop at an intersection. There's a number of criteria, but the two key ones are crash history and traffic volumes. So when it comes to crash history, at both of these intersections, we looked at about a 5.5-year window of crash records from the police department, and the number and severity of crashes did not rise to the level to warrant in that manner. In terms of traffic volumes, one of the important factors is to make sure that the side street volumes are in somewhat proportion to the major street volume, so it is an even or close to even split. Really, we did not find that to be the case at all here. Prospect Street was significantly higher than Oakland Road approaches or the Elmwood Avenue approaches. So for each of those two reasons, always stop control wouldn't be the appropriate improvement at these types of intersections. But with that being the case, we don't stop there. We look at what other improvements could be done, such as these bump outs, such as potentially blinking signs. And you'll see on the left side of your screen, potentially adding what I'll call the missing crosswalk on the south side of the Oakland Road intersection.
So just so that was the three-way stop at Elmwood. Did we look at anything previously at Oakland?
Yeah, we essentially concurrently did the study for both of those to see if either one would be a candidate for an always stop. And both of them, the volumes and the crash history didn't substantiate that type of improvement.
Okay.
So just to add to that, it's the volume information is really very critical. What happens is the volume is probably 10 to 12 times more, obviously, on Prospect than it is on the side streets. And what happens when you introduce an always stop at a location like that with those type of unbalanced volumes is that drivers start to disregard the stop sign on the main road. There's very infrequently people on the side street when you're talking about 10 or 15 cars to one. So that is why the FHWA, Federal Highway, is very strict and specific about not only volume, number of cars, but also the proportion of cars. And we are proponents of always stop. I think they are very effective in the proper location, but this is a roadway regulation that has to get backed by a township ordinance that has to have an engineering licensed signature that says it is warranted and the proper traffic control device for this intersection. And these intersections, I understand that the most recent crash is horrific, but the crash history before yesterday is just not there, and the volumes, do not satisfy even close to what would be considered, something acceptable for that treatment. So that's why that's just to give you a little bit of background.
Okay, so I'm going to get to Deb in 1 minute, but what you're proposing here is just for these two intersections, correct? You have similar proposals for anywhere else along the avenue?
We didn't get into anywhere else.
On the street?
This came across obviously quickly yesterday.
Okay.
So we just looked at these two spots, knowing that we'd talk a little bit about general treatments, maybe.
And would you agree that this would improve pedestrian safety because it gives them a shorter crossing? It may slow some traffic down, but in general, part of the issue here is from Parker to Tuscan, there's only one light, and it's just a sort of a long road that people build up steam.
Yeah.
So this is really not to slow traffic down, is it?
Well, anything that narrows the road or gives the driver pause, such as lighted ped signs and bump outs and improved striping, I think those things do have some impact on driver behavior. Obviously, it's not a stop sign, it's not a traffic signal, but if you remember back in the day, NJDOT was very, very strict about where you could put stop signs and always stops. They have since relegated that decision making to the towns. But their thing was always, you should not use stop signs for speed control. And since the DOT has relegated that decision to the towns, you see always stops popping up in a lot of places. And I will tell you, a lot of places do not really warrant that. I'm glad someone didn't ask me to certify that, but that's how towns are addressing some of these situations. I think a layered approach here with push button signs and more visibility enhancements for pedestrians is the next step. And then we can look further if necessary.
And
Okay,
John,
we've been joined by Township Committee Woman Deborah Engel, and Deborah, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Vic. I just had a quick question because Dynamic's the same team that we're talking about bike lanes with, and we're talking about bump outs now, which kind of are the opposite of bike lanes. So I'm just curious if you're suggesting that we spend money on bump outs, but then a couple years later, maybe we're going to spend money on bike lanes. And I'm just wondering what other traffic calming measures from an engineering perspective are possible so that we don't just waste money for bump outs when we have a longer term plan.
So I
Exactly.
know, Deb, you and Nancy both mentioned bike lanes on Prospect, but I just want to make sure the public knows there's been no decision to do anything yet on Prospect.
Right.
What we're talking
Right,
about
but
is
I'm just
Parker
saying-
today.
I know that,
Yeah.
but every study that we've had about bike lanes stating you're better at citing all these studies always have Prospect Street as bike lanes. And I know I've even said it's going to be really hard to overcome that parking barrier on Prospect. I get that. But if long-term planning, as we talk about alternative transportation networks, include Prospect Street, I don't know why we'd spend money now on bump outs when we know that's going to make it, I don't know. It's confusing to me.
John, are you talking physical bump outs or are you talking striping for the bump outs here?
Well, I'm always talking physical. I don't, physical has the next level impact than striping does. But this while this looks like a cartoon, and Pat, I'll steal your thunder since I'm talking already. It looks like a cartoon, but it's been thought through. Deb, if you look, the bump outs are only partially into what is already striped out as the parking lane. So there was some thought that maybe both could be accommodated in the future. The bump out would give some room to do the ADA ramp and potentially the push button sign. But there would still be a portion of the parking lane, which is 8 feet wide, that could accommodate a bike lane in front of the bump out. So if you'll know, Pat, you just want to zoom just real quick on one of them. So I know it looks cartoonish, but there was already some thought in future planning that we don't want to do something that, we either have to undo or it precludes a decision later in for the bike lanes. So the long answer is yes, we thought about potentially the future, and maybe this is a midway step.
John, can I ask you another question with regard to Prospect, because you've done studies on it, right?
Yes.
At these peak times, am I correct to say that volume of traffic is the issues more than speeding?
I mean, speed, the speeds are probably a touch above the speed limit. But there's a lot of cross streets, a lot of turning into and out of, and there's a significant pedestrian activity. So that tends to help the driver speed. Volume is high. Like I said, it's probably, do we have notes here? It's over 12,000. That's daily. Yeah.
Right.
So,
We keep talking about this because we only have so much infrastructure and the population in both towns is growing. So
Yeah,
people are bypassing Valley Street and coming on Prospect.
yeah, it's definitely, I mean, there's tremendous traffic using Prospect. So it's not as local a road as we want it to
As
be.
it used to be, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a pretty significant volume, 12,000 ADT,
Yeah.
average daily traffic.
It's huge. It's huge for a road like this.
Yes.
That's right.
But it is a north-south connector. It
That's right.
connects South Orange with Union.
Yeah.
And goes right through Maplewood.
Yeah.
Paul and Patrick and John, do you want to say anything else about Prospect on sort of the entire stretch before we have comments from folks?
Yeah, I do. Just want to mention one thing. We did apply for a municipal aid grant for Prospect. We're still waiting for the state to get back to us, but we anticipate getting the grant. And if that's the case, then we would be looking at, repaving the entirety of Prospect Street, and that would clean the slate for any type of design, bike lanes or pedestrian safety improvements that we have in mind. So that would basically clean the corridor up, so that any new striping would really pop and I think be more effective. So.
And when is that? That would be 2026 probably?
Probably 2026, yes.
Okay. John or Patrick, anything else?
No, Vic. I'd be happy to hear from the residents.
Okay. If anyone would like to speak about, and can you get rid of the share? If anyone would like to speak about Prospect, feel free.
Hi, this is Vicky speaking. Vicky Arlene. Quick question. Those studies, the accident studies that were done on Prospect, were they just since the law changed about stopping for pedestrians in the crosswalk, or did they go beyond that? Because as in the case of the children and other people, the assumption is that cars are supposed to stop in a crosswalk. And I'm wondering if the study of accidents, is it all affected by the new law, or if it's just from before the new law, or both, or whatever?
Right. The crash history we requested and received from the police department was over 5 years from today. So it includes I guess in those 5 years, it was always stopped for pedestrians, if I recall correctly. But it's not just a 1 year snapshot. We do go back at least 3 years. I like to go back 5 years to see that. Now, again, remember, when we request crash history, it's only crashes that are, recorded, reported, etc. Right? So there could be activity that's happening that does not rise to the level of crash reports that the police would have, hands on. But that's what we found, and that's what we have to utilize in our justification.
Thank you.
Okay, Rob Howley.
Hi there, Rob Howley, 497 Richmond. I want to open with a stat. Drivers are 6 times more likely to stop for pedestrians in a crosswalk if they're going 20 miles an hour versus only 30 miles an hour. Now I know it was mentioned that the speeds on average are a little higher than you'd want them, but I'm looking at if you look at the tail value in particular, you only need one driver going like 40 to cause a problem. So designs that factor in, max speed matter. Prospect is far too wide. I said it narrowed it, but the little white stripe does not really change the feel of the road. It's a long straightaway that feels like a highway because of its like the unused free parking makes it feel extra wide. So paint's not infrastructure. I like the idea of physical barriers. I don't know why you would put the bump out on the outside, have the bike lane go in, because that leaves the road wider, unless you're going to put a physical barrier for the bike lane. But this road is too important and heavily used to be left the way it is. It needs a full redesign, not little stopgap measures, not little bits of paint. There's no amount of paint or crossing guards or patrol cars that can offset its fundamentally flawed and dated design. Maplewood passed a complete streets ordinance 12 years ago. So it's time to get back to the drawing board on our main roads. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else want to make any comment about Prospect? Malia?
Thanks. So I live on South Crescent between, so Malia Herman, 6 South Crescent. I live on South Crescent between Valley and Prospect. So my teenager uses Prospect a lot. With the intentional integration plan, I think there are a lot more kids crossing Prospect, such as entire neighborhoods. I know the whole area at like Parker and Richmond, for example, used to all go to SOMS, and now they all go to MMS. So I don't have the numbers on that, but I do think that there are a lot more kids using it. Second point I want to make is that the kids are using Prospect at all times of day. They're using it to get to school, like MMS, Tuscan, Columbia High School, but they're also using it to get to friends' houses after school. And there's a lot of kids that also walk down Prospect when they're going to Underhill for the football games. So I asked my daughter what it's like crossing Prospect, and she said it takes a long time because you have to wait for a car to let you cross. Pedestrians and crosswalks have the right of way, and yet they have to wait for the cars to let them cross. And that's just kind of backwards. So I drove down Prospect after this happened and counted all the crosswalks, and there are crosswalks at every intersection. And I like that engineering, it looks like you're looking at adding, making 2 crosswalks at Oakview, because that's the one where it sort of comes into Prospect and exits at like different places. So that makes sense to me. But the thing that really stood out was that the crosswalks are very faded. If you drive down Ridgewood, for example, it looks amazing. So I want to say to DPW, the whole road, I know you just repaved it, and the crosswalks are restriped, they're bold, they're bright. And I really like there's those plastic posts in the middle with some iridescent signage. It looks really good. So I think to whatever way we can make Prospect look a little more like that, I think would be really, really good. I think that sounds like that would be a short-term thing. It sounds like repaving and restriping might happen in 2026. But if there's any way to look at like improving the striping or the paint in the meantime, it seems like that would go a long way to really making the crosswalks pop and like stand out to motorists, because it is difficult for motorists to see those crosswalks. I think in the longer term, we do need to be looking at Prospect as a complete street with bike lanes, like what Deb was pointing out regarding the bump outs. But in the short term, I think new paint will go a long way to making this safer for our kids.
Thank you. Anyone else want to make a comment?
Yes, I would. Hi, my name is Alyssa Umansky. I live at 3 Suffolk Avenue. My daughter also walks to MMS. She was actually with the group of kids who was hit the other day. Similar to Malia's comment, she does mention that it often takes a while to cross Prospect because they're waiting for people to stop despite being in the crosswalk. I think a couple of the questions I just wanted to raise here, sort of flagging a few things that were mentioned in the chat. Wondering whether a crossing guard might be something that could help, at least as a more immediate stopgap, if additional traffic studies and implementations might take a longer time. And then also to the question of stop signs, I'm just curious how the conditions are different at that area where there was an accident the other day, compared with Prospect and Harvard, which recently got a stop sign, as well as someone in the chat raised Midland and Summit, which also recently got a stop sign. I think it would just better help folks understand like why one area is sort of worthy of a stop sign versus another.
So we'll have the engineers answer the second question. The first question about the crossing guard is going to be discussed tonight at the public safety meeting. So we will make sure that they know that we had these conversations and suggestions, and we'll factor that into tonight's conversation.
Thank you.
On the difference between Harvard and Prospect and these.
Yeah, so Harvard Prospect, a number of years ago, we did perform a similar study for Always Stop There. Some of the key differences were the Harvard Avenue volumes were higher in terms of both vehicles, and especially pedestrians, nearby school especially. We also noted when we began that there was an existing overhead flashing beacon, which obviously, was put there for some reason long in the past. So we knew this was a historically problematic intersection, and continued to see issues at that time. So it did meet the warrants for Always Stop in that location.
Will Meyer and then Julia.
Thank you so much, Vic. Will Meyer, 366 Academy Street in South Orange. I am a member of the Board of Education, but I'm speaking here as just an individual today. I did feel compelled to join the meeting, however, after 2 of our students were hit walking to school. Prospect Avenue is an important artery through Maplewood and South Orange. As a driver, it is an absolute delight to drive on, especially in comparison to Valley 1 block down, which is why many folks prefer it. And I greatly appreciate the efforts the township has done to date. It's clear that you're not ignoring the issues on Prospect. And I am loath to step in and try to tinker with your thoughtful work. But as a resident on an adjacent street off of Prospect in South Orange, it's really concerning as an element for parents having their kids walk to school and activities where they have to cross over Prospect. What should be an easy neighborhood walk on foot becomes much more treacherous. It is not entirely unlike interstates that were threaded through cities and broke entire neighborhoods up. You look at the map and you've got a 0.6 mile strip between Tuscan and Parker where there's no traffic controls at all. You have lights at both of those, but of course, if the gods are looking down friendly upon you and you have greens straight through, you can build up tremendous speed over the course of a long distance there through Maplewood. Crossing guards are a start to calm traffic, especially for our kids going to school, but we know how many incidents there have been of one car that slows and then another car jumps right around them straight into the crosswalk. And the crossing guard is only there during prime school traveling hours as well. I think additional traffic calming measures would make a lot of sense. Looking at keeping those lanes as narrow as they can be. One answer to folks hitting the bump outs, of course, would be a lot more bump outs. So you expect them. More barriers put on the double yellow line near crosswalks prevent folks from jumping out one way or the other into that crosswalk. Consideration of reduced parking, installation of bike lane striping, which of course we know is a traffic calming measure, and adding more stop signs, as the town did for Prospect at Harvard Avenue, and on Jefferson at Maplewood Avenue and Walton and Woodland, where we know that there were concerns raised. Does this meet the criteria for adding a stop sign? At the end of the day, though, we needed to have that traffic calming. Having this long a piece of roadway for traffic to go at speeds well above the posted limit, I think really is a concern. And look, as far as it impacts the board, if we can't trust that kids are able to cross the street safely going to school, that could at some point force a determination that every crossing on Prospect is hazardous, which would trigger an obligation to provide hazardous route transportation at tremendous additional cost and really with no need. And most importantly, there's that common trope with traffic hazards. We always say, do we have to wait until a kid gets hit to do something about this? So I guess the question is, was 2 kids enough? Thank you.
Julia?
Hi, thank you. I'll just reiterate that I think Prospect would really benefit from a redesign and protected bike lanes, which research shows will slow down traffic. I encourage the town to think about making a plan for how you'll do a redesign if you don't get the municipal aid grant. I think members of the public here would benefit from knowing that South Orange applied for that same municipal aid grant for the South Orange section of Prospect Street, but we didn't get the grant. So that is why the repaving that is happening now is just pure repaving without any extra striping or safety measures. If we had gotten the grant, the town had planned to do some traffic calming at Prospect and Garfield, and maybe we would have been able to add other measures. So that's a missed opportunity. And I appreciate that Maplewood, is in general open to adding multi-way stops. We've seen more of them added in recent years in Maplewood than South Orange. I think what people are wondering about is some of it seems, the applications seem inconsistent. I have the engineering study for the Summit and Midland multi-way stop, and the crash numbers there are very low and do not seem to meet the MUTCD guidelines for crashes. So it just, begs the question of how does this happen in some places and not others? Making sure there's a consistent standard applied for safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I mean, if anyone has any new thoughts or information, I mean, I think we've gotten the point that something needs to be done. And we have been, and Will, I want to push back a little bit. We haven't been just sitting around, and no crash is, acceptable. We have been trying to make some changes. As Paul mentioned, we've done a lot on Prospect and we need to do more. And we're going to continue to do that. So Paul and Patrick, I do agree with one comment that it seems that by just dealing with the Elmwood Oakland intersection, it does not deal with the other. It doesn't create a uniform look along the road, where we have other crossing issues. I mean, we have a lot of people, for example, on Oakview that come up from the train. So why would we not do these bump outs on the entire strip?
Well, I can say we can certainly look at that. I mean, as I said before, we have a municipal aid grant, so that's something that could really help us. First of all, pay for these improvements, right? That's something that can go a long way towards that. When you start adding curb work and bump outs, the cost goes up very quickly. And at the present moment, we didn't budget for curb bump outs on Prospect. So that's something that we'd have to look into building for next year's budget. I think we did hear the comments from all the residents, a refresh of this design, it seems like that's in order. But I would be hesitant on doing a full redesign along the entire stretch if we're going to mill and resurface the whole road in approximately a year and a half. So I think for now, you know, that's something that we'll revisit, these problematic intersections, and I think for now, we have to do what we can to implement some more safety measures. One thing off the bat that was brought up was these in-street pedestrian signage.
Right.
That's something we can add immediately, so we can, you know, have those added. I know we have in the past, sometimes they get removed, sometimes they get hit. We try to stay on top of them here at DPW, but that's an improvement we can make right away.
Yeah. So is there anything else that, and I think we agree, Paul, that we don't want to do major construction that we're going to rip up in a year or two. And we want to do it thoughtfully and with some consistency along the street. Do we have any ability to do some the bollards that we used on Burnett? Those sort of temporary, what do we call those, Paul?
No, it's quick curb with
Yes,
with
yes,
with
thank you.
bollards, yeah.
Yeah, is there any opportunity to do some of that on an interim basis where we might be able to call out some of these intersections a little bit better? If John and Patrick took, you know, maybe goes back and looks at you so that we can do something more immediate, recognizing that we are going to do this major paving, but I don't want to just say we're not going to do anything for 2 years.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we're gonna build in measures, but in terms of restriping everything or redesigning everything, just, we all have to keep in mind that in literally a year and a half's time, we're gonna resurface the entire road. Anything we put down now is gonna get taken up.
No,
I'm
I
not
think we
suggesting
know
we
that.
do nothing.
All right. No, I hear that, but I want to know what we're going to do then. And it's
I-
got to be more than, you know, we're going to do some striping.
Well-
We should probably refresh some of the crosswalks that need it.
Agree.
But is there something else that we can do temporarily that sort of mimics what John and Patrick have brought up?
Yeah, I think there is, and I think that's what we're gonna probably reconvene. Dynamic
Alright.
engineering, traffic, and my group, we're gonna reconvene and try to figure out a plan that's short term and then longer term.
I want to give Mayor, do you want to say anything more on this?
No, when you reconvene though, Paul, I want to sit with you and John and stuff on that.
Dean Daffis, any comments?
No, thanks, Vic.
Deborah Engel?
No more comments. Thank you.
Okay. Rob, you're gonna have the last comment on this.
I have a really specific question about the RRFBs. I know they were mentioned as a way to calm traffic on Prospect, but we are going, like, later in this meeting, we're talking about redesigning Parker, which has a whole bunch of those, and Parker is no safer than it was before. So what's the rationale for thinking they would work on Prospect when we're doing Parker?
Mr. Howley, what was installed on Parker at the time, it was through a Safe Routes to Schools grant, and it was a different type of flashing beacon. What we're talking about are the box beacons that, you know, have the yield sign, but the box is it's a high intensity light. So it catches the attention of the driver. I think it's much more effective than what's on Parker right now. In fact, what's on Parker now isn't even, correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, but Pat and John, but I don't think that's even accepted by DOT anymore as a new improvement, right?
Well, the new technology is RRFB, which is LED-based rapid rectangular flashing beacon. Those, I mean, the driver compliance with a lighted sign, no matter what the lighting feature is tremendously higher than a driver compliance with an unlighted sign. So while the ones on Parker, they were the old technology, the ones we've been installing lately in town, like on where were those?
Burnett.
Burnett. Yes, thank you, Vic. Those are the new technology. So you know, you can't just stick a sign out there and hope that it's going to work. It will have some benefit, but again, it's a combination of striping, of bump outs, of in-street signs. It's a combination of all the tools in the traffic calming and pedestrian safety toolbox that makes the significant difference. So you'll see, you know, we're trying to layer these things in as budgets allow and as conditions allow.
All right, thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Mary Mann, do you have any questions? Guess not. Okay. We're going to move from Prospect to Parker. And we have, and just so folks know, just to wrap up on Prospect, we've asked our engineer to go work with our consulting engineers, our traffic engineers, dynamic traffic, and come back to us with a proposal. So we'll address this again. And anything on that you come up that you can implement before our next meeting, then you should go ahead and do that on a whatever temporary. You can check in with us. And then we'll put this on for our next meeting in November. Okay, Parker Avenue Corridor Improvement Plan. So we've been working on this for some time. We did meet with folks on Parker. They've attended some of our meetings. We did pass a resolution back in March. Giving a contract to Dynamic to come up with a plan. And we now have that plan. We're going to take a look at it and discuss it.
Can we pull that plan up, gentlemen? Do you want to just describe the plan?
Yep, coming up.
This is the part I should be listening to.
So before hopping to the plan, I guess we're just going to walk through kind of some of the background information that was collected Yeah, so as was alluded to before, we took a holistic approach at Parker Avenue, specifically with regards to how to bring it in compliance with complete streets policies, how to make it safer for cyclists, pedestrians, motorists, etc. One of the key changes that was being evaluated was the conversion of existing on-street parking to bike lanes. The road's very narrow, too narrow to accommodate both of those features, so it really is an either or. So what we did was we went out and performed parking counts on a number of days, and looked at existing parking regulations, etc. So we broke the entire road up into all these numbered blocks, over 30 of which, and summarized their parking utilization, which you see in this table down here, with green colors representing low utilization, red representing high utilization. So as you can see, what we found is while on-street parking is legal there in most locations, it's very underutilized. Two main exceptions were at the west end at Columbia High School and at the east end at Milo Borden Park and Playground. There were a couple spikes, in the afternoon hours where there was some parking activity in those locations. Sure.
Just to show the magnitude.
Yeah, so this is essentially the number of parked vehicles over time, with about 200 spaces available in the total run. And you can see that most at any time was just over 40. So only about 20% utilization at the highest time. So based on Parker's location in the town as one of the more continuous, longer streets, and based on the underutilization of parking, this seemed like a good candidate for potential bike lane improvements.
We'll go to the plan now, and we'll pick a spot. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we broke it up into blocks. It's hard to show the entire run all at once just because it's so long, but this is a pretty representative block, I would say, or combination of blocks at some of the improvements that we're discussing. The existing condition you see from left to right on the top of the screen, and the proposed at the bottom. So what you can see at the bottom is new bike lanes installed with a new stripe separating it, narrowing the lanes down to 11 feet to provide some traffic calming benefit. Upgrading of those existing LED blinking border signs we actually discussed very recently to the new RRFBs, rapid rectangular flashing beacons. Refreshing crosswalk striping, stop bars, adding stop word markings, etc., really making the intersections highly visible to motorists. Adding crosswalks at intersections where they're missing. So in the middle of the screen at Norfolk Avenue, there's a missing crosswalk which would be added. And then several intersections we performed individual safety evaluations and looked at potential always stop inclusions. This one that you see on the right side of your screen, Burr Road and Suffolk Avenue, was one that did rise to the level of warranting always stop. It's a good location within the block too. It's roughly midway in the span between the nearest traffic signals. So it's nice to kind of break up the monotony of that long uninterrupted stretch. So while it's not there for traffic calming purposes, it's warranted, based on its own right. It does have some ancillary traffic calming benefits. So this gives you a good snapshot of the improvements we're looking to do across the whole run. Yep.
So we're not going to go through the whole corridor unless you want us to. Vic,
I
or
do want you to
Mayor?
talk about the area around Boyden and Parker, because we do have, we have the park there and we do get a lot of parking.
Yep.
What is your plan there?
Yep, we'll flip to it. Give us a second. It's a big file, so
Yeah, just a big
bear with
deal.
us. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so in this one location, this is where we did identify some of the most utilized parking. There's also a retail business on the north side of this block between Borden and Orchard. So this was one location that deserved a little bit of a special attention. What you'll see, I guess I'll move from west to east. We have the signalized intersection with Boyden Avenue. There's special treatments for how to carry bike lanes through signalized intersections to make sure it's visible. You see this dashed green bike lane extension markings in both directions. To the east of that intersection, we thought this was a location where the on-street parking was important and needed to be maintained both for the park and for the business. So for that reason, in this one block only, we will be converting the bike lanes back down to shared lanes. So that's what we refer to as sharrow markings. It's the bike lane symbols that are sometimes placed within travel lanes, indicating that this is a shared space. Vehicles need to share that lane with the bikes. Continuing west to east, once you get to Orchard Road, that was another intersection that had some historical issues. There's an existing overhead beacon. We took a look at sight lines, et cetera, and found that sight lines could be a bit improved there. So we were calling for some daylight striping improvements at the intersection, just an upgraded refresh signing and striping package for that intersection. And then beyond that to the east is where the traditional formal bike lanes would pick up. So because of that parking utilization, this one block, we gave it a special treatment.
So this is the only spot where we have in lane bike lanes, correct? In road lane, in car.
Yeah, shared lanes, correct.
Shared lanes.
Yep.
Okay. Everything else has a separate bike lane, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And there are other municipalities. I think I mentioned when I was in Cape May, I saw something similar to this where they weren't able to accommodate a separate lane, so they do have the bikes go into the traffic and then come back out into a separate lane.
Right. There's design guidance for how to do those transitions both in and out of the shared lane section. So it's pretty standard treatment, and it's used a lot on some of these, older existing roads that are being retrofitted as opposed to brand new roads being designed.
Okay. So if I'm not capturing this correctly, please correct me. The major changes, there'll be no parking on Parker except for this stretch between Boyden and Orchard on either side of the street at all times. There would be a bike lane on each side, with one lane of bike traffic going east and west. There would be the introduction of a new four-way stop at the corner of Suffolk and Parker. Is that the only place where there's a four-way stop?
Correct.
Okay.
And enhanced RRFBs.
And then enhance we're gonna do new push buttons at each intersection?
Yeah, not just new push buttons, but essentially upgrading those blinking signs that are no longer permitted by the latest design standards and upgrading them to the modern, which is the RRFB.
Okay.
And filling in a few crosswalks that were not there.
Yeah.
Okay. And have you put any of this to numbers? Have you come up with numbers for this? How much this all cost?
We did a preliminary cost estimate. It's broken down. There's some options within here as far as what you do with some of the existing striping to be maintained versus not. So, do you redo the whole road at one time? Do you layer it in? So it kind of depends. It would be difficult to kind of assign one number to it at this point.
Good hedge. You could be a politician. So you don't have any back of the envelope number.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember what it is.
Okay. All right.
Circle back. We'll get it.
We'll get it.
Okay.
I'll get it for you. We have it. I'll get it for you. We're not being
Okay.
evasive. I wasn't ready for that.
All right, that's okay. It's election season, so we're used to evasiveness. We're gonna leave the map up because people might have questions about any particular aspect of the plan. But I invite folks on, particularly who we've been working with on Parker, to give us some feedback. Martin, I see, has raised his hand. So Martin, why don't you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Martin Separate. I live at 152 Parker Avenue. I'm also a cyclist, so this is really huge. And I commend everyone that's been working on this. It's I think it's a huge step forward. For one thing, to just prohibit parking on Parker Avenue. I think we all know parking is not really safe, and it's clearly not being utilized. So I think that alone is a big step that's going to calm traffic. In terms of the bike lane design itself, I think it's a good step. My main question for dynamic traffic would be, has it been evaluated to shift the double yellow line 4 feet and put a double two-way bike lane on one side? That could lead to some additional safety for cyclists and reduction of people using the bike lane as a parking zone or a loading zone. And in the future, if we're able to add protection to the bike lane through posts or something, it would be easier to do if it was on one side versus both sides. Other piece of feedback, I think for sharrows, what I've seen in other municipalities is signs that say explicitly bikes may use full lane. I think it's very good to be very explicit about what a sharrow is, because a lot of drivers don't really know what to make of that sign. But yeah, I think this is a huge step forward. And well, another thing about the paint, I mean, I understand the green blocks are cheaper than doing a full green lane, but I think if we were able to afford a full green paint job, it would increase the safety of the lane versus just the green blocks. Yeah, and just let's see, 2 other comments in general. Yeah, I think Prospect Street should be considered as bike lanes. There are already de facto bike lanes on the sides of Prospect. I ride them every day, and the parking there is very underutilized during the week. So I think that should be considered. And also at the train station, that there's no bike parking is full at the train station. So we need to urgently add more bike parking at Maplewood train station. So yeah, that's all on my side. Thanks.
Thank you. Rob?
Hi again. I want to thank you for doing this. Like Martin said, being willing to remove parking to serve a higher land use purpose to accomplish our complete streets and environmental goals. Awesome. Love to see it. Thank you, everyone. But in terms of the actual design, I'm a little like Martin, I'm a little curious about whether or not we can include an option for a two-way on one side, because it would be it would be cheaper to add protection, fewer signs and whatnot. But there's also a huge an active running community in Maplewood, and that creates they run in the street, understandably. It creates enough space for cyclists to pass. I only get around by bike. So you don't have to put well over 1,000 miles a year on your bike like I do to find out which sorts of things work and who you're going to run into. And then if there's no budget for flex posts or tough curbs, painting the green does help. There's a few studies, including the one that the collection of studies that got it into the MUTCD. Cars driving in bike lanes goes down by half if you paint it solid green versus unpainted. But it's still not protection because it's paint. Rutgers, just last year or the year prior, came out with a study saying that just something cheap that doesn't actually provide physical, like a great physical barrier, but flex posts will cut the speed of cars down by about 10%, reduce their max speeds when they're turning right by 28%. So if we really want like traffic calming, we just think about these sort of like little tricks of the eye with the vertical barriers and create a safer protection, and really help not just cyclists, but such as myself and Martin and many other people on this call. But the runners or people with strollers, wheelchairs, etc. So thanks.
Yeah,
Mr. Howard,
address the two-way bike lane question real quick, because
Yeah.
it's come up a couple times now. So it's definitely something we did take a look at. The reason we landed here, there's two main factors. Number one is when you have a two-way bike lane, there's one of the bike lanes that essentially is, traditionally on what you would consider the wrong side of the road, right? So in this example, let's say you put the two-way bike lane on the top side of the screen. The cyclist going from left to right is going against the flow of the traffic adjacent to him. So with that being the case, you need an additional buffer required in between those two that you do not need if the bike lane's in the same direction. And when you factor in the additional width required for that buffer, it's actually too wide of a treatment you need to fit in Parker Avenue, given the existing carway. If it was a little bit wider, it's an option we could consider, but it's actually not wide enough considering that additional required buffer. Additionally, just from a driver behavior perspective, it's a little bit less expected to have them on that side of the road, that contraflow direction of bike. So for what's effectively going to be one of the earliest bike lane implementations in town, we thought also a traditional right side bike lane would be, good to kind of get everyone used to the treatment.
Dozen intersections.
They've become very common around New York, and it's people seem to manage just fine there. It's a good separation, but I'm just curious for my own knowledge. How wide is Parker, and what widths are you looking at for travel lanes? And how wide would the two-way be? How wide would the one-way be, and stuff like that? So I'm just curious about some actual numbers.
So the prevailing width of Parker's about 30 feet in most locations. So it's enough for a 10-foot travel lane, which is a narrow lane, and a 5-foot bike lane, which is really the minimum you want when it's adjacent to a curb. Just because there's a little bit of a shy offset. Bikes don't want to be hitting the curb, so they ride a little further over. So we're basically down to the bare minimums on both of those numbers, and it adds up to 30 feet, 15 feet on each side. This particular block's actually a little bit wider, so this could fit the parking that's there. The prevailing, most blocks of the road are actually a little bit too narrow to permit the parking that they currently permit.
So 5 feet is what you go with for the one way, and how wide would a two-way have been if Parker could accommodate?
So for a two-way bike lane, generally want.
I'm sorry, Vic.
Sorry, we didn't catch that.
Go ahead.
No, typically you want 10 feet for a two-way bike lane. You can go as narrow as 8, but then you need a 2 to 3 foot buffer. So you end up, a foot or two over the 30-foot width that we're working with here. If you were to go for a two-way option.
Yeah. I like the contraflow lanes. I've been telling Paul, I think that's a big bite for Maplewood's first bite, especially in a block like Parker, where there are probably 12 intersections, short blocks. I agree that in Manhattan and in Jersey City, in places where we have one-way road systems and we have longer blocks, those types of things work, less driveways, etc. But we think that the each side bike lane is the proper treatment for Parker at this time.
John, Pat, is there Mr. Howley brought up physical barriers. Is there an application where quick curb and some of these bollards might be effective, do you think?
If we have the width, we would absolutely provide a buffer. The problem is we're not working with a wide enough road to provide either striping buffer or, I would love to put flex bollards, but we have to think about, again, how many can we put in? We have driveways, we have intersections, and we have to watch the width of the road is most important.
Understood. We may not need it along the entire stretch. It may only be certain portions. I don't know where we have to emphasize.
Sure. Those things are easy to screw down the road. We can absolutely look for opportunities to put physical features, because I agree, striping is one thing, but physical features changes drivers' behavior. And like in front, It just does, because there's something they have to actually watch out for and et cetera. So yeah, we will definitely look into opportunities at certain corners or et cetera to have some enhancement. I would recommend, Paul, like if we do a striping of just a bike lane, that bike lane edge is like an 8-foot-inch stripe. It's not just a 4-inch wide white stripe like you see traditionally. We would, if we have the room and we want to select that, we would do a double wide stripe. Now I know it's just striping, but it does draw your eye to the fact that there needs to be some separation here from drivers and bikes. So there's little tricks, but unfortunately we don't have a lot of width to do a lot of really significant things.
Okay, so I want to get to some other speakers, and I would like to hear from folks who live on Parker also, because, and we're certainly willing to take the compliments that we've presented this, but I just want to make it clear that this is not a done deal. We have to get buy-in from folks on Parker and some of the adjacent streets and some of the larger institutions. We have a synagogue there, we have the Ethical Culture Society, and we have the high school. So we have a lot to do in order to get buy-in before this is an adopted plan. Rich?
Hi. Okay, I won't compliment you then. I was going to.
No, you can do that. You can do that.
After 30 years of being involved at some level looking at this, I'm just stunned and appreciative of this. I was just a couple quick comments. One was mentioned, I think, by the previous speakers. It had to do with the color of the bike lane. They were talking about green, and I was going to make it a question, is what else do you do to make the bike lane look different than the street, and what's in the plans? Let me just mention just a couple other things. They're very easy. I think having these major regular riders comment on this is really useful and great. Obviously, they'll ride anywhere and do. It's the shaky riders that are the key, and that's what you want to really make it feel safe for. And I think that's those are the people that we need to be talking to as this gets laid out more. I'm guessing that you already have somewhat, but if we could talk to the parent with a couple little kids that are just starting to get around, that's the kind of thing that really makes this work as a large community thing. The last thing I wanted to say, having a good friend that was hit by a bicycle in Manhattan the other day and is still recovering, that I think one of the lessons is that enforcement has to also include enforcement of behavior by the cyclists and not just the drivers. I think that the cyclists are, sometimes are more cavalier about crossing a stop sign without stopping when it looks open. And I think there's major risks to pedestrians. I'm majorly pro-cyclist on this, but I think it's a reality that needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
Julia?
Hi, I love to see the green paint here. I want to know if the engineers or administration anticipate that requiring more, maintenance than white paint, because South Orange is painting 2 bike lanes this year and requested our request to use green paint for safety, because they were concerned about keeping green colored paint on hand and the frequency and expense of repainting. So I just want to make sure that, the town has a plan to maintain the green paint and also share with South Orange that it's a good idea to have consistent look of our bike lanes across the 2 towns, since we're just starting out with this. And then my child goes to Clinton School, and I think, like you're saying, it'll be great to get public feedback from the communities that frequent this area, and the Clinton population. I'm sure we'll have a lot of feedback. In particular, the multi-way stop at Burr. It would be interesting to understand a little better the choice of Burr rather than Burroughs, since Burroughs is the highest point in the road and where there's a crossing guard already stopping cars, and then they'll have to stop again a block later at the 4-way stop. Not to say that's necessarily a bad thing, but just making sure that everyone's aware that that's the situation, and that Burroughs is the one that leads directly to Clinton's school, whereas Burr is more of a side street, not directly leading to the school.
Thank
I
you.
could talk briefly about the maintenance issue. It absolutely is gonna be more maintenance for us. We don't currently stock green, that color paint, but it's something that if we were to implement, we would certainly do that. DPW does have the ability to maintain certain facilities, but if it's too much, then we normally would sub that out to a company like Straight Edge Striping, for example.
Okay, thank you. Jesse?
I'm at 138 Parker. Thank you so much for all of this. My question is, we are at the intersection of Parker and Union, and then the next block over is Highland. And I at some point recall there was a suggestion of putting a four-way stop at Highland. We have a crossing guard there who has a pretty difficult job in the morning. But that intersection, that's also right by the Jewish Center as well, kindergarten. And those cars do get backed up onto Parker, also where Union is. Yeah. So I was just curious why there isn't gonna be a four-way stop. I also was late to this, so I don't know if that was already discussed, but that is my question.
Yeah, we can address that kind of briefly and also to the previous question. So we looked at a couple of the key intersections, and what we were finding is a lot of them, similar to the Prospect ones we discussed earlier, didn't have enough volume on the side streets to substantiate bringing Parker under stop control. We didn't want to end up in a situation again where, there were stop signs on the major road that over time stopped being abided by. Burr was one that had a more substantial traffic volume on the side streets, so that's why that one was able to meet it. But the other ones didn't, and for some of the ones like Union that are T intersections, they're already kind of playing from behind in that regard because they only have one approach to make up that volume that Parker has two. So it's generally a little more challenging to warrant it at T intersections for that reason.
Okay, Alyssa?
Yeah, hi, thanks. I'm still on 3 Suffolk Avenue. I was actually one of the people talking with the town about potentially bringing in stop signs to that corner of Burr and Suffolk. I've lived in that corner for about 9 years and have seen dozens of accidents happen there. So I'm glad to see this coming together. I did have a question about what the general time frame would be, like obviously getting community feedback and then assuming that that is approved, how quickly something like this would be implemented, and also whether the two are inextricably linked. So for example, might we get stop signs ahead of bike lanes or vice versa? Do they only pass together?
Good question. So on the timing, it's going to take a while to get, I think, the balance of the year to get community buy-in, which also corresponds to our budgeting process, where this is going to cost some money. So we'd have to put this into the capital budget for hopefully 2025. And then it would have to get out to bid. So we're talking about this work, Paul, probably next year at this time, or maybe
Yeah, I think that's fair, maybe even a little sooner, but we're probably looking at look, the ideal time to do it would be summer, but I don't know if we could commit to that. So
right.
We're probably looking at the fall.
Right. So to answer your question on staging, could we do one thing? I think we have to go back and take a look at that. That's the answer. And it may be something that we can do sooner rather than later, because the four-way stop, if it's warranted, I don't know if we need to wait to have the whole package together, but that's something that we have to discuss. Okay, anyone else? Jesse, are you just I want to go back to you for a minute. What do you think the reaction is going to be from any of your neighbors about no parking on Parker?
I would agree with the sentiment before that I think Martin said most people don't park on Parker because I think it is kind of scary because cars are racing. we had a contractor working here years ago who actually got clipped by a car, you know, as he was exiting. The issue, I think, will be things like fresh direct trucks and UPS vehicle. I mean, we do get deliveries, so I'm not sure where those trucks would go unless you're allowed to stand, or even like, oops, we forgot our, you know, the kid's backpack, so we have to run in really quickly and not pull in the driveway. So I don't know what kind of rules are surround those things, but I mean, there's a lot of deliveries, and it's a really heavily used street, so that just would be my concern. I do support the bike lanes, totally fine with no parking. I think people will adjust.
Yeah, there's also a lot of side streets there too, so some of those
Yes.
delivery folks could pull on a side street and run a couple of I know they don't like to do that, but
They just
I-
park wherever they want.
John and Patrick, I assume that there are no examples of temporary parking in a bike lane. If you have a bike lane, there's no parking, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to enforcement, it comes down to how often, and it comes down to the town's preference, to be honest with you. You're not supposed to stop in that lane, whether you're running into a pizza or an Amazon box, or, you're longer. So you're right. There's a lot of cross streets. We figured the residents would get used to it and would, guests would park on the cross streets and walk a couple of homes up. And then it comes down to the town's preference as to how strict and, those things want to be enforced.
Okay. Rob, you spoke a lot today. You have anything new to say?
I have a question about a follow-up on some of your comments in particular. It's like over the course of these discussions, there's like on-street parking is kind of referred to as almost precious. The data says not very used. To what extent in like the town committees and engineering's deliberations on stuff like this are the fact that like people on Parker and Prospect have driveways? Like at what point do we like how does that factor into how precious we view the parking when there's already off-street parking?
It depends on every street. We talk about it with every street we're talking about. Some streets, like Hilton neighborhood, has very short driveways, and sometimes they have more people in them. So while we want to make complete streets and do all that, we can't negate the fact that people have cars. So we have to consider everything, and it's not an easy balance. So
Just in this picture right here, you see stacking of cars. So if the inside car has to get out, then this would require two people to maneuver, as opposed to one person pulling out the first car, parking it on Parker, and then getting in the second car and pulling out. So it does create some difficulties for folks, but generally, we try to preserve parking in front of people's homes. So this is a major difference. Cynthia, we haven't heard from you.
Hello. So we're on Orchard and Parker. So we wouldn't have a bike lane on our block because of the park and the playground and the business across the street. I am all for no parking on Parker. I live on Parker. If we have visitors, they can park on a side street. We can figure it out. We have a small driveway. So my question is, you mentioned that this needs to go through multiple stages. So does this need to be approved by the residents on Parker only? Does it work like a percentage? I guess I just not sure how that process works.
No, this would be approved by the township committee. So what we would do is spend time getting input from people on Parker and anyone else who feels that they're a stakeholder in this. And that would mean having some meetings, probably a couple of different meetings, or maybe 3 meetings, and have these plans presented and hear from what people have to say. Having special meetings with the synagogue, having special meetings with the high school, because they front Parker, and anything and the ethical culture, anything that fronts Parker and where their clients park at, we would want to have some, one-on-one conversations with them. And then at some point, the township committee would pass an ordinance creating all the rules for parking and travel on Parker.
Got it. Okay, well, I do think it's a step in the right direction. I'm excited anytime I see a bike lane, especially now that we have a lot of schools ramping up and getting bike buses going to school. So like I said, I'm hopeful. So thank you.
Jesse, your hand is up. Did you want to say anything again?
No, sorry,
Okay.
I didn't
That's all
take my
right.
hand job.
Okay. All right. Anyone else want to comment? We can take this screen down, Patrick. Thank you. Let's put some people back up here. Okay. Man, we still have a lot of people on this meeting. We're going to sell tickets next month.
Yeah, they'll drop off during the boring stuff coming up.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a lot of boring stuff's coming. Well, actually, no, the Greenway is coming. So we're going to leave it at Parker. I think Patrick and John and Paul, you got some great feedback here. Take a look at this again, see if you want to tweak it at all. And then we'll need to, Mayor, my thought is we're going to just have to set up community meetings, maybe in sections, because people are going to want to know what happens in their section.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about scheduling that and going forward with it.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for their comments. There were some really good suggestions, and I think there's a lot of good suggestions in the chat box too. We're going to make sure we copy those and take a closer look at that as well. So thank you.
Julie, I hesitate to have you speak because we want to move on, but can you be quick?
I have to go. So I don't know if there's new stuff coming that I haven't seen already from this, but if someone can maybe fill me in after this, I have to get to work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next is for anyone who's interested in biking, the next piece we're talking about is really a connection to this, and that is the Greenway. As you know, we made some improvements on the walkway and bike lane between Jefferson and Parker, using that stretch along the river, and then the student parking lot. And now we want to talk about the bike connection, because the pedestrian connection between Jefferson and Memorial Park is going to be the sidewalk. There's really nothing. We can't take the private property. So the sidewalk will be used, and we'll talk about how we might do some signage along there to identify that as the Greenway. But we also want to accommodate bikes. So we have a pretty significant set of recommendations that make some major changes along Dunnell. Is that setting you guys up enough?
Yeah.
Paul, do you want to start, and then we'll share a screen and jump in?
Yeah, I'm just going to introduce this. So obviously, earlier in the year, and I know Committeewoman Engel had just dropped off, but we had completed a portion of the Greenway from West Parker to Jefferson. And DPW was, a big part of that as well, constructing the pathway and working with third-party contractors to get that done as well, and filling in the parking lot, but for the school. But that was a portion of the Greenway. And this Greenway's actually been in the works for many years with the township. It was always difficult, trying to get Board of
Where's Will Meyer? It was always the Board of Education.
The Board of Education approval, but I think the one portion that still had to be worked out in concept was, from Jefferson all the way along Dunnell to really Oakview. I mean, the whole goal of the Greenway was to connect Jesuits Field to Memorial Park, and also, connect our mass transportation, our trains, for example. We always look at it from a complete street standpoint. So I think we have a concept plan that we want to develop. We've worked with Dynamic on this. And, you know, they can present this. I'll turn it over to them, but I think it's something that's really going to give us some thought here. So with that, John, Pat, you want to pull up the plan
Yep.
and maybe walk us through it?
Yeah, I was just gonna set the stage for everybody. So as you mentioned before, it's really Donnell Road from Jefferson Avenue where the Greenway lets off, all the way down to the train station, then to Baker Street, this 3-block run, which we're gonna show kind of 1 block at a time. Flipping over to the plan, so this is the northern block. North is to the right on this sheet. So Donnell is, you know, right to left on your screen, from north to south. Again, same as the last plan you saw, existing condition on the top, proposed condition on the bottom. So what we're showing as the proposed condition is dashed bike lanes in both directions. So a similar design to Parker, bike lanes along the curb lines and travel in the middle. The interesting component of this design is Donnell's exceedingly wide, or narrow, excuse me, much narrower than Parker was. So we need to make these lines dashed in the same way that, you know, on a conventional residential street, between, you know, on-street parking on both sides. The 2 directions of traffic need to essentially share the middle section and, you know, swerve around each other into the bike lanes when 2 are passing at the same time if there's no bikes present. It's really the best treatment you can do with the very narrow cartway that we are working with here. We did kick around the idea of shared lanes here, given the narrow width. You know, it's one of those things where we do it when we have to, but it's never our first choice. This seemed like a good option to provide an actual formal bike lane that would formalize, you know, that condition a little bit more for driver awareness.
Now, Pat, just so we're clear, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
This treatment is actually almost an experimental treatment through FHA, right?
Correct. So it's a treatment that's recognized by FHWA. It's still, you know, rather new. It's kind of, I'll call it on the cutting edge. So for places that are implementing it, they actually want you to submit to them with the location so they can keep an eye on it and monitor it. And at the end of the day, it's subject to their approval. So if for whatever reason they were not okay with using it in this location, we could modify it to do a shared lane marking, since that is, you know, a standard compliant operation. But subject to their approval, we think this would be a better option. So that's what we would pursue.
One other thing to point out, that the parking along the top side, right, top side of Donnell, would be removed in this plan. So this is the one segment of Donnell that would experience a loss of on-street parking.
How many spaces are there? About 8 or so?
Well, that's just for commuter parking.
For commuter.
That's from the houses on, this is what we're talking about, the west side of Donnell, from the houses to the right to Jefferson. That's commuter parking. Then there's parking in front of the homes, which is also allowed.
Right.
Yeah, so you can see there's, you know, a 2-hour parking restriction on the southern 2/3 of this block, 8 to 4 on school days, and permit parking during the morning north of that section. So it's really, you know, trying to gear this section primarily for the residential use,
So
as
so
opposed to further south.
just so we're absolutely clear here, this is a so this is a little bit different than our last meeting when we talked about this, because we were talking about Sharrows, but we have not had any conversation with people on this block about eliminating parking,
Right.
which is different than Parker, because Parker, we've had a series of conversations with people there, so they understood that things might change there. So we are eliminating commuter parking for a lot of people who might be, you know, living up, you know, up from Jefferson, coming down Jefferson, making that turn there and parking there for the train. So those are our residents that have to move. And then, of course, the residents on the street won't have parking. So this is going to be a bit more complicated to maneuver as far as getting community buy-in here.
Right. But if you look, you look this segment, and I won't belabor this segment, we'll jump to the next, but it's very narrow. And we know that Sharrows or shared lane markings are a fine treatment where absolutely necessary to combine or link lanes. But we think that this length of road really deserves to have this dash lane or, you know, this treatment of a full bike lane. So we're trying to make everyone happy here, leaving the vehicular traffic enough room to maneuver, And while, indicating to them that when they need to, it is acceptable to utilize the width of the road. So with that, let's jump to the middle.
Just one other thing I just want to make clear here too, because I don't want someone to say, well, why don't we make this one way? We've had conversations with the fire department, and the fire department needs to have two-way access here. We actually need to we need to have access from Jefferson to the train station so that people, again, coming east on Jefferson can make that right there and go south towards the train station. But also the fire department needs to go north on Donnell to get underneath Jefferson to access that area there. So I invited the deputy chief to join us today, but he had training. So, but we do want to have a sit down with him to just explain all this that we're talking about.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up.
So let's go to the second sheet.
Very good.
Okay, so second sheet, this is down from Oakland Road where we left off, one block south to Oakview Avenue. The main change in this location is just to kind of give a frame of reference. The existing road is two-way in this block. You can see to the left of the page, the next block it meets up with is actually one-way only in the southbound away from us direction. Whereas this block is two-way today with parking on both sides. So it comes down again to not having enough width to kind of serve every single purpose. We recognize that the parking is at a premium in this location due to the train station. You can see it in the existing aerial on the top of your screen. So while it was potentially an easier decision to eliminate parking on Parker Avenue since it's underutilized, it's certainly not the case here. So we need to make up room somehow. So the main change we would be considering implementing on this particular block is converting it to one way in the southbound direction, similar to the block that already exists further south of it. As you noted already, Vic, relation to the firehouse, it would still have the flow of traffic away from the firehouse, which is the more important for emergency response. And up at the actual intersection with Oakland Road, which over the past several years was converted to an all-way stop, that's been fairly successful at improving the safety of that intersection. Small leg of that northbound approach would still be maintained to maintain exit to the north. So you can see here. So this section remains two-way. From here south becomes the new one-way treatment. What that one-way treatment allows you to do is it picks you up width to work with to add in the bike lanes. So along the southbound direction with the flow of traffic, we have a traditional bike lane between the travel lane and the on-street parking. It's a very typical, conventional application. In the northbound, going back to what we discussed earlier, that's what we call a contraflow bike lane. It's going the opposite direction from the adjacent vehicle travel. Because of that, there's a buffer required between the two. What you can do in a situation like this is to actually use the on-street parking lane as part of that buffer between the vehicle and the bike. So in this case, from left to right, you have the southbound parking lane that exists today, new southbound bike lane, southbound travel lane maintained, and then this is an additional parking lane that I'm hovering on now. So still access from southbound traffic only. Beyond the parking is where we actually put the northbound bike lane. So it's completely separated physically, both by the parked vehicles and by an additional striped buffer from the moving vehicles. And then it again reaches the all-way stop where it can, then go wherever it needs to go in a traditional manner. So it's a bit of a, unique block here that we have to work with, but this is, in compliance with the latest design standards for bike lanes. And it seems like a very good application here, given the need to maintain on-street parking and sort of the door already being partially open to the one-way southbound based on what already exists in front of the train station. No questions on that. I'll move on to the next one.
No. I didn't know you were wanting.
I wasn't
You knew
expecting
the
it.
questions. Yeah, you didn't expect that to be so easy to suddenly make that one. Yeah, I have real concerns about traffic coming from Valley to up Oakview toward Donnell and turning right. And then there are businesses over there. I'm sorry for my dog. Can you shut the dog up? Businesses over there by where it says Nelson's and then there's offices in that whole office, but I don't know. I have real concerns with what that does. So I would need to see some sort of traffic analysis with people coming off Valley Street, and a lot of people turn off Valley Street to avoid Valley Street and go Oakview to Jefferson, and then take a left to Jefferson to get up to Maplewood Avenue. So this also, at least now that more people are finding parking on Donnell or Maplewood Village, they come from Jefferson and turn onto Donnell, and get there that way and then park along the train station. So there's some circulation there that might not be intuitive, but it's, something that I do and I've witnessed other people do.
Right. There's no doubt, Mayor, that this needs to be analyzed as like at least 4 or 5 corners around this potential one-way to identify the redistribution of traffic and what that means. There's no doubt.
And there's also the Y, uses the house, the civic house right there as well. So drop offs and things like that are people coming down Oakview and hanging a right, pulling over, dropping off their kids at the Y and stuff. So.
Okay.
No,
While we're still on this page, do you want to jump to the crosswalk there? Or is that the
Yeah,
next thing?
so Oakview Avenue, that intersection on the left side of your screen is kind of the transition to the next block. But to touch on the intersection itself, in addition to obviously making Oakview Avenue a left turn only, if that one way were to come to fruition for this block, we did notice again that there's no crosswalk provided at this intersection, which it typically would be. It's where drivers expect there to be crossing locations. So we would be showing a potential crosswalk being added on the northern side of that intersection, as you see there in the kind of the brighter white proposed striping for the crosswalk. Also allows you to provide some sort of physical island to help really protect that parking lane and really kind of be a gateway entrance to this northbound bike lane that would be created.
I think Mr. Howley has a question.
Yeah, we're gonna wait, Paul. Let's just get through the whole thing first.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, I got him.
Yep. All right, flipping to the southern block. This block's a little bit, simpler. It's much less substantial of a change than that block we just discussed. We're right in front of the train station. There's a lot of parking provided now, angled and parallel. It's all at a premium. It's all heavily used. So in this location, there's a wide, 15+ foot travel lane existing between the rows of parking. We would just be, striking a line down, striping out a formal bike lane and a formal travel lane within that space.
Does that bump out that we put in, I don't know, 5 years ago or something, that extreme bump out affect the width for cars and bikes?
Yeah, so that's the tightest location in this full stretch. If we could go back in time, I might offset that a couple of feet from what it is today. But it's there, we can work with it. One thing we did show in regards to right in front of the train station, there are 2 existing crosswalks that do not have those bump outs. There's 2 things really to talk about with those. Number one, there's the potential to add them. They are still, a beneficial treatment, not quite as large as the existing one. But additionally, between the one at the front door of the train station and the one potentially to be added at the intersection, just right off the page, I think it's worth discussing potentially whether we need this crosswalk that would be right in the middle of those 2. If it were to be eliminated, it might just simplify this whole stretch, and it would provide the benefit of adding a few additional parking spaces in that existing striped area. So that's, a potential option on the table as part of this improvement.
And Mayor, just to answer your question, if you zoom down there, Pat, that area is very tight, and you'll see this is an area where, because it's only 100 feet, we would look to do some type of different treatment, marking, striping, dashed, something to the effect. So we don't lose the whole, you don't lose the whole bike lane because of just that one little piece, but we would absolutely have to look at it a little bit differently.
Yeah, thanks.
And that's it in a nutshell. That's as far as we've gotten on the connection for the bikeway down to the trains. As you said, there's a lot that needs to happen for everyone to feel comfortable, Mayor, with that. But we welcome any questions on the design.
So this has no return lane, correct?
This block has no return lane, correct?
Yeah, so in the central section, there was width available to maintain that bike lane on the opposite side of the parking, as I described earlier. In this section, due to how wide those angled parking spaces are, you don't have the same amount of width to work with for northbound. So the block is currently one-way southbound, for vehicles only. It would continue to be one-way southbound for vehicles and for bikes. We didn't want to not provide the southbound bike lane simply for the sake of not being able to provide the northbound. We want to provide the one that we can in the same direction as the vehicles.
Okay. So now we'll get some comments. Paul, did you want to say anything before we get into comments?
No, I just want to say the last two slides, I don't think there's a reduction or loss in parking. I think it was just the first slide.
Correct.
We actually talked about the loss in parking, so.
You're correct. There's actually the potential for a small gain.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a loss of about 6 to 8 commuter spots, and then whatever the residents use. Some of those driveways on the west side are fairly narrow. So we'd have to really have that conversation with them. All right, Rob.
Hey, Ian. First of all, thanks for fielding all my questions. On any given month, I'm probably threatened by more drivers than will use any of the parking spots we discuss. So improvements in safety, really appreciate. As for the bike lane coming, I think it's by the stores right before the train station. Is there any reason why why only one side is parking protected? Why you didn't go parking protected on both of them? Because as designed, it's currently in the door zone. I'm familiar with the term. Someone opens their door, hits the bike. It's terribly painful. So like when there's a door zone lane, it's safer to just not ride in the lane at all. So this would be the rare instance where I'd say the bike lane is doing more harm than good in that case, unless there's a way to switch it and have both sides be parking protected. So I'm curious about the thought process there.
Yeah, good question. A combination of factors. Again, it would require an additional buffer when the bike lane is on I'll call it the inside of the parking lane. There's an acknowledgement that they can, hug their left line a little bit more to avoid door swing. So there's not the formal striped buffer required. It's certainly beneficial if you have the room to provide it, but it's not, required in the same way it is for the northbound contraflow lane. And in the same direction, it's a little bit more conventional and expected to, keep the parking along the curb line where it traditionally has always been, and to keep the bike lane in between the two. That's what you would typically apply for a street that was two-way, for instance, where parking was being maintained. It's really only northbound that got that special treatment because of the extra sensitivity involved with going the opposite directions. It's the potential for crashes of more severity would go up without it.
Is it wide enough to accommodate the alternative design? And your concern was about like how standard it is, or I'm just curious, like how, like I don't know how wide these roads are exactly.
Yeah, Rob, the primary concern is the width. We're doing this, obviously, as you can tell, on an aerial. So when we get to a real design, we might actually find a foot or we might lose a foot. I don't know. So we could consider it. I agree with you that it's an option on this block. We could look into it and see if the width is there, but it will. Parking protected does require additional width than traditional bike lane placement. So I don't want to guarantee we have that width.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for hearing me out. And I look forward to learning about how wide some of our roads are.
Okay, so look,
I've learned they're not wide.
It's almost 10 o'clock when we normally adjourn, and we have not even dealt with 80% of our agenda. So I'm going to ask Chris and Julia and Rich to just make your point. We're not going to answer anything. This is the first time, that this is being presented. We have a lot more to do with this before we move forward. This is a completely different situation than Parker. So, Chris.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you all for your time and your work doing this. Totally just want to get to that third point because you had me so much with the Dunnel improvements, which I'm 100% for. I do this every single day with my son, taking him to or from the YMCA in the mornings. I'm deeply concerned about that last part where it will not be bi-directional. It'll be a one-way for Dunnel onto Baker Street. It seems like we'll prioritize getting kids to middle school, the multi-million-dollar library that will be opening in 2025 now, but how do they safely get back? And I'm wondering why parking is such a priority here. I mean, take a picture of all the overused bike racks. I use it often when I go into the city. There's plenty more bikes and people going to the station that way. Why do we need cars to be unused using that space all day, 24 hours? Is this something the town, can actually visit and not prioritize parking here? I think almost anything that is permitted parking is pretty much unnecessary.
Are you talking about the train station parking?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's a priority for us too. So that's an equal priority here. So, okay, thank you. Julia?
Hi, thank you. I appreciate, that you have these long meetings to go in depth. Regarding the Greenway, this is related to Parker. I also wanted to point out that the design is missing the crosswalk that still needs to be installed at Buckingham Terrace Parkway, connecting the Chiswick Field driveway across Parker Ave. So, wherever that design lands, whichever plan it's in, it just reminding people that still needs to be done. And then, yeah, same concern about the one-way bike lane in front of the train station, because currently bikes are going the wrong way on that street because actually feels safer than going all the way around and onto Valley. I think also, so bikes would continue going the wrong way on that street, even without two-way bike lane. So that's something to consider. And especially with, one of the goals of the Greenway is connecting both middle schools, especially with the intentional integration plan. There's more kids from Maplewood going to South Orange Middle School and vice versa. Thank you.
Rich?
Hi, so on the issue of, can you make all of Denell one way? And it just out of my total ignorance, are there any designs with emergency lights or flashing emergency lights that allow a fire engine to go the wrong way up a one-way street? Is that done ever, or is that crazy?
Vic, you're gonna let me answer.
Rich, thanks for the suggestion, but the fire department's never going to sign off on that.
Well, that's what I said.
No.
I didn't know. I mean,
No.
I was wondering if there's any
We're not
option
going
on
to,
that.
we're not, our lawyers would tell us that we're crazy to take on any kind of liability like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. We're going to move on to other items. Let's see. Okay. The Black Lives Matter painting on Springfield. I'm just thinking, I don't think we need John and Patrick anymore. Is that right, Paul?
I think we have everything.
Well,
covered.
I'm sorry. Did they have anything to add on Tuscan Street traffic calming?
What do you got?
We have information on it if you'd like to hear it at this point. Yep.
Well, Paul?
No, let's hear it. I did
Okay.
have it highlighted. So yeah, Tuscan Street traffic calming.
Yeah, so I can just summarize. I think it was last year we collected data out there in June, pick up speed, volume, et cetera, in response to a traffic calming request that came into the town. What we found at that time was 85th percentile speed, which is kind of one of the benchmarks for evaluating such things. Was about 29 to 30 miles per hour, so 4 to 5 over the 25 mile per hour speed limit. Based on that, some signing and striping improvements were done to the road, but it didn't rise to the level of warranting speed humps at that time. Since then, we're about a little over a year later. We were asked to collect new data, see kind of what the effects of that improvement have been, just to evaluate the current need for some more substantial improvements. We're finding 85th percentile speeds now of about 27, so about a 2 mile per hour reduction from what it was before. Then we also like to look at the outliers just to see, okay, of the more severe speeding, what was the change? Previously, we had about 12% of vehicles traveling over 30 miles per hour. That number's dropped to about 4% in the past year. Vehicles over 40 was very few. There was, over the course of a week that we studied in 2023, 13 vehicles were tracked going over 40, whereas only 6 a year from now. So there's been some beneficial improvements from those previous striping and signage modifications that have brought speeds down a little bit on average, with the prevailing speed now within about 2 miles per hour of the posted speed limit. So
How about volume, Pat?
yeah, volume's been reduced a little bit as well, by about, 150 vehicles per day, maybe, 8% or so reduction. Previously it was about 2,000 vehicles per day. Now it's about 1,800 and change vehicles per day.
So less cars and less speed, is that what you're saying?
In general, yes, that seems to be the trend, what's resulted from what was done last year.
So would you say that the improvements we made were effective?
Yeah, certainly. I think that bears out, that has been effective. Whether there's an appetite to do any more in that location based on what we're currently seeing, it's, something obviously for this committee to discuss. But I think that's certainly proven that what was done has had a beneficial effect to date.
Are there any additional improvements you'd recommend? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of signing and striping improvements, really what was done is what we would recommend. Speed humps is the obvious elephant in the room for speeding concerns. But that's a big change, and often a change that doesn't necessarily solve the problem. It often moves the problem. So it's, something you don't want to do with, a light hand. It's hard to say if we would recommend them at this time. It would be good to kind of hear what the resident experience been in the past year, if they've seen an improvement, before making a decision like that.
And Paul and Vic, I think we talked at some point about, looking at Tuscan neighborhood as a whole,
Yeah.
right? You could look at each of the individual streets and find something different, but we have to look, as Patrick said, if you put speed humps on one street, a portion of that traffic is going to redistribute. So we want to look at that area, that neighborhood holistically, if you deem that necessary. But from year to year, the volume and the speed has gone down a touch. So that's what we can tell you at this point.
So Paul, can you get this analysis and write up a memo, and we can get it to the residents and get their reaction at the next meeting?
Yes,
I'm sure we're not done with this one.
I don't think so.
Okay. Thank you. I think you guys can stick around, but you just can't bill us for the rest.
Thank
Very
you,
good.
gentlemen.
Thanks, everybody. Good to see everyone.
All right.
Thanks.
The Black Lives Matter painting. Paul, it looks like you got a quote to do both Springfield Avenue and Valley, but
We
I
got
think
to
Valley's not in bad shape, but Springfield Avenue is pretty bad.
We got a total of 3 quotes, but the lowest quote was $1,293 for each location. So, it's something that we've worked with this company before, Straight Edge. We've worked quite often with them. I think Straight Edge originally put the one in front of the police station on Springfield Avenue. So, if the town is interested, we can authorize either one or both of them.
I'm interested in doing the one on Springfield.
Okay.
Nancy?
I'm fine with Springfield too. I'm sorry, I'm multitasking with work too. Did you just say that we're gonna paint it before we're gonna be repaving anyway?
So probably spring of next year, I know we talked about this, the municipal aid grant is going to, I'm sure we're gonna construct a municipal aid grant. So all of Springfield Avenue is gonna get milled, resurfaced, and anything we put down now would be milled and taken up.
But as usual, we don't have a start date yet, so it could be later than
Yeah.
spring. And I just think for $1,200, this is an
okay.
important statement.
I'm
Dave, you wanted to say
okay.
something? No. Okay. So let's go ahead with the Springfield Avenue one.
Okay.
The commercial property at Irvington and Franklin, Paul recommended that we do a co-share on the sidewalk replacement. Nancy, you were
Yes.
going to look at that?
Yes, and we actually had our road contractor provide us pricing for this, and the total price was $11,550 that they quoted for the entirety of the sidewalk. It does not include curbing. So if we were looking at a co-share price, it's around $5,775 each. And I've mentioned this to Mr. Wang, who stopped by.
I looked at it and it's also wider than a typical sidewalk.
It's large, yeah.
It's very wide.
So is there a way to do it without it all being brand new? Like, is there part of it? I feel like part of it closer to where the work the county did was in need, but the other part not as bad.
I think you gotta do the whole, I think you gotta make it consistent, otherwise it's gonna look
Well,
hot.
you gotta stop somewhere, right? So.
You know what, honestly, Mayor, I think the price difference is not gonna be significant because they're factoring in having to remobilize to the site and get the concrete crew there, and us reducing that small amount of concrete probably isn't gonna have a significant difference on the price.
Yeah, understood. That's fair. I guess I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Did we ask the county if they want to share?
We've already asked. They don't want to have anything to do with it. Listen, we actually got them to do more than they had anticipated doing.
Yeah.
On the other end of that building,
They
so
did expand the scope.
they did expand it to cover up to the church property, so they just couldn't, because it's a Franklin Avenue piece, they couldn't justify the expenditure. And it, you know, that whole area has been improved there, and this sort of sticks out, so.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
Paul, you'll work with Patrick on crafting some kind of agreement with this property owner?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd be happy to.
Okay. Stormwater utility, we had a meeting with the consultants yesterday. We've tasked them with helping us to work on an ordinance that we hope to introduce in December. We're also going to start working on matching up our tax, our block and lots with accounts so that we can factor all that in and continue to move forward. Valley Street improvements. Paul, can you just give us, I mean, there's a lot of work being done. People are asking us if sidewalks are going on the east side of the street, which we know they're not. But what is the scope of work? It looks like they sunk a lot of something there. I don't know if it's drainage pipes or what, but could you talk about the scope of work, particularly at Baker and Valley?
Yeah, so there's, first of all, on Valley Street, there's a total of 11 intersections that are getting improved by the county. This has been a process that started back in 2017 through a road safety audit. And right now, they are in the process of installing foundations for the new light poles that are going in. You know, it's a lot of work to do that, but they're at that stage. And when they're done with that, they're going to have their subcontractor actually work on sidewalk improvements, including the west side along between Tuscan and Baker. So, you know, that's a tricky spot because we don't have sidewalk on the other side. And we actually sent the county some guidance in terms of how to handle that safely to, you know, increase pedestrian safety during construction. So that went out. I know there's been back and forth conversations between Asif and myself. And, you know, Mr. Weary's been on site. He's been hands-on with this too. So there's, you know, a lot of thoughts and opinions on how to do this safely. You know, we're going to continue to try to work with the county on that.
Anybody have any questions? Malia, you have any questions?
No, just thanks for answering the question about where the sidewalk is going, because we've been hearing from neighbors on Valley on the other side, wanting a sidewalk there. And then just to let you, I mean, they keep hitting, I think they're hitting water mains as they're going down, the water main as they're going down there. We've lost water twice. We lost it last night and then last week as well. So I know it's not you guys doing the work, but they're
Unfortunately, they keep hitting utilities, and sometimes that's a part of construction. You know, we rely on the markouts that the utility companies perform, but they're not always 100% correct. So.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. And speaking of utilities, we don't have it on this agenda, but it did come up. We have this situation on, I guess it's Fairview, with a resident who was at New Jersey American Water and the curbing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we've seen the emails. Mayor, you have anything more? I mean, we've seen those emails. It seems that you're in conversation with them. Not an easy one, but at least you're having those conversations.
Utility? The utilities?
Yeah.
New Jersey American? Yeah. Yeah, we're having a conversation. Actually, I talked with Sheena yesterday partly about this because they want a statement from me about what a good partner they are to work with. And I wish the last few months hasn't happened because they generally have been better than most utilities, right, Paul?
New Jersey American Water, sure. Yeah, in
Yeah.
this case, they had a water main that went, and through the process of fixing it and restoring the asphalt, this resident's curb was damaged. So
Right.
it still remains the responsibility of the utility company, and I think the original repair that was made, they're not happy with. So I spoke to the New Jersey American Water. They're willing to reconstruct the curb that was damaged and redo it. And we're just trying to get some specifics out of the homeowner, in terms of the reveal that they're looking for that repair.
We require a 6-inch reveal?
We normally, the standard detail is 6 inches, but and it's often not, we often make changes to it if the surrounding curb is lower, to match existing. Otherwise, it would look out of place. You still get the same full depth curb. It's a 20-inch curb, but in this case, I would recommend matching existing, which is only 2 inches or so, because I think if you went for a full 6 inches, it would look a little abnormal.
Just, yeah, I would, if you don't mind talking to the resident about that, that would be helpful. And then get him to agree on that, or maybe it's slightly higher. But I think we need to hold New Jersey American to that for sure, to fix
Yeah.
that. We
No,
do
and
have,
they're owning it.
yeah, and we do have that priority. They have to, I mean, we do have that authority to hold them to it. It may take a while, but we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to compliment you, Paul. I thought your responses to the resident were measured and informative, and it's up to him as to what's the size he wants. Okay.
We try to be professional.
Paul, is there anything on any of these other items that you want to bring up? I don't want to go through each one.
We're working on the SEPI grant for the police building. We have an RFP out for the repair on Town Hall.
Yeah, no, I don't want to do that, Paul. I just want, is there anything that we need to know?
I don't.
Do the rest of you guys got to go back to work, and
The only thing I want to note is the Village Center parking lot construction's going to start next week. That's the latest schedule we have. And the contractor, D&L Paving, we've been working with them, and Mr. Wary was also very instrumental with that. And, we're trying to get that work kicked off. So we've been going back and forth with them on that. So I also have, for Safe Routes to Schools, I have an agreement for the preliminary design services. I'll be executing that, and we'll need a resolution. So I'm going to get that on for the next meeting. I have one last thing to say, and that is Red Zone Robotics. They were the winner of the contract to do the townwide survey for sections 1 through 3 for the sanitary sewer. We've kind of hit a snag because there's an issue between the survey and the elevations that they're representing. So, our consulting engineer, Mott McDonald, doesn't agree with their numbers, and it's now become a bit of an arm wrestle. So I sent it over to Jen Crediti, our township attorney, for some input there. I think that's all I have right now.
Okay, Mike, do you have anything on the park stuff or anything else on your side, the DPW side?
I mean, I'll keep it short. I know we spent a lot of time on other topics. We did put in a new pathway at Memorial Park that
Great job. Great job.
The AARP grant.
Yeah, it looks great. I just want to stop you just to give you huge congratulations and thanks on the work DPW did with the Conservancy. They are so happy with what you've done and working with them, and they had a lot of volunteers out there planting on Saturday, and it's just been, you know, thank you for stepping up for them as always, honestly, for the Conservancy, and the Conservancy is incredibly grateful. I mean, it's been a great partnership. Thank you, Mike.
No, thank you very much. And we enjoy doing that kind of work. And I spoke with Deborah, and we watered the plants that she had installed on Saturday. So I'll just leave it at that. So thank you.
Mr. DeLuca, I do have one major thing to talk about. I can't believe I didn't remember this initially. There is a sinkhole at Baker and Maplewood Ave.
Yes,
It's
we heard about
substantial.
that yesterday.
It's substantial, and we're working on a repair RFP right now. It's going to be like a design build. We actually need some guidance from some of these construction companies. So I think we'll work on it. We're going to continue working on it. I have a meeting later today on it. But it's going to be an emergency repair, and it's not going to be a cheap repair either.
And if we had a stormwater utility, we would have funds to.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
What caused it exactly?
We're not sure
Water.
that it's age. Age is certainly a factor. I think a lot of the pipes are clay in this structure, and they're just old. The age can certainly play a major role in this, and it just hasn't been, the system hasn't been maintained, I think, in a number of years. So, these are all factors that contribute to it, but we're trying to figure that out as well.
Okay.
Last meeting, we talked about DeHart. We were getting the consultant. Where are we with that?
So we received proposals from consultants, and we need to set up meetings. I know I spoke to Ms. Mancuso about this and Mr. Wary, and we're gonna check everyone's schedule and get those meetings set up, hopefully as early as next week.
Okay. And we're still working on the all accessible RFP too, right? Playground.
Mr. Wary, you wanna update that? Do you have an update?
Muted, Pat.
For the inclusive playground, the
Yes,
jigsaw playground,
Yes.
we have the RFP drafted. We're waiting for approval from the state. So they've told us that they're awarding us the money. They told us that it's been included in the past state budget. They haven't sent us grant agreements, and we haven't had our kickoff meeting. So until we do that, we can't send out the RFP. I followed up with the DEP last week, haven't heard back from them.
And I'm sorry, going back to DeHart, we're getting some complaints about the condition of the field, and we understand that it needs to be redone. But is there anything we're not doing or doing differently than in the past, or?
I think, and Mike, I don't want to speak for you, but I think we were overseeding the field on a regular basis. It was looking great. Recently we aerated it and overseeded, and we turned the irrigation on to allow the seeds to actually take. And, that could have contributed to the recent events that were noted. But otherwise, I think the field responded fairly well to the overseeding through the year. Would you agree, Mike?
Yeah, we had it looking good. And we've been overseeding regularly, like you pointed out, but it's just being overplayed perhaps, and it's just not getting enough time to rest for when we see it. I don't think it's getting time to germinate properly.
That's never going to go away unless we do something about it. Mike, we have 2 9/11 memorials, one at the train station and one on Springfield Avenue in front of the library.
Yes.
Can you make sure we have those on a regular system just to clean up? We have that tree and some planting over by the train station.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll see something.
Okay. And Saturday we have the opening of the little library in DeHart Park.
1 o'clock.
Right.
Yeah, we're gonna install that on Friday.
Okay. And then I think we wanted to thank you for meeting with Soma Cycle. They were very happy to meet with you, Mike, and she learned a lot about what we're doing.
Yeah, we spoke a few times, and I told her if she ever had any other questions, she's more than welcome to reach out to me, and we can discuss whatever she needs.
And I think the mayor is going to be meeting with them in a couple weeks or so, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else we have?
God,
I'm
I
probably
hope not.
forgetting some things, but it's a long meeting.
One last thing, the EV chargers at DPW are working, they're fully operational, and the senior bus is expected at the end of the month.
Okay. And what about the electric jitneys? Any word on those?
Dave?
State DEP has still not released any of their agreements or documents. I've been following up with them on a weekly basis at this point.
But we have corresponded recently with them and everything's in their court, so.
Oh, so we haven't even ordered these yet?
Has not been ordered, the PO has not been issued. They haven't given us authorization.
So we'll be using these existing jitneys. Are they gonna last?
We've been keeping them running. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think, you know, we have really good mechanics and I think we've been keeping them running. And we do have, you know, some backups, so.
Okay. All right.
So the senior bus is coming at the end of the month?
Yes.
Okay, we should do something.
Yeah, we should have a ribbon cutting
Yeah,
or a ride around.
yeah, something. So let us know
make
when
sure-
they get it, huh?
We'll make sure it's charged before that.
Yeah, good idea.
Oh, yeah, that's,
Any other comments from the public? All right. Thank you, everyone. It was a productive meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm tired. I gotta go to work and then we have public safety tonight. Yay. Good times.
Yeah, I'll be joining by phone from City Field.
I was gonna, are you really?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome. They could wrap it up tonight.
That's the plan.
It's open.
Okay, see you all.
Take care.